Well, hello, my paranormal peeps, and welcome back to another Deep Woods Paranormal podcast. My name is Matt Harvey. I am the founder and lead investigator with Deep Woods Paranormal. I am also the host of the Deep Woods Paranormal podcast. Today we have on a guest. His name is Citizen D. We're not going to use his real name because he's done some things that are not exactly legal. Um, I forever, as a kid, growing up, heard about crop circles. And I've always been fascinated with crop circles. I've always wondered if it's aliens, if it's just people. Is it ghost? Is it just coming from the earth? Is there something else going on? Is it paranormal in nature? So our next guest is going to talk to us about that. Full disclosure, okay, guys, we do not condone number one, trespassing, number two, damaging people's property or crops. This next guest is a really cool guy, and we're gonna let him kind of talk about what he's experienced and what he does. And please just keep an open mind. We do like to bring in, both sides of the paranormal. We like to talk to skeptics. We like to talk to believers, people on the fence. We like to talk to everyone. And this guy is a very knowledgeable person about the paranormal, especially crop circles. So without further ado, let's welcome in Citizen X. Citizen X, thank you so much. I mean, Citizen D, excuse me. Thank you for coming on with us today, and we appreciate it. And go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story.
I'm a paranormal sort of freak. I've been sort of following it since I was a child. I don't know where it came from. Um, when I saw Close Encounters, I thought it was a documentary. It was just really touched me on like this primordial level as a child. Then I became very interested in ufology, but it was harkening back to the golden age in the 80s and 90s where, you had the great literature from Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Jenny Randall's, John Spencer, and we had like the MUFON reports and Flying Saucer Review. I was a member of Bufora. And we started to see in the UFO casebooks in the 80s, as along with like new UFO reports and going back to classic cases like Lenny Zamora and Kelly Hopkinsville, they started to print pictures of single circles imprinted in the cornfields around these sort of Neolithic and ancient and very important sites around Wiltshire, around Stonehenge and Avebury, these traditional, very ancient, powerful sites. And their precursor was the 1970s Australian Tully nest, which I'm sure you're aware of, which were also like imprints that looked like birthed, flying saucers, but they were in grass. So the ones in crop were far more pronounced because the crop was like 1 or 2 foot high. And sometimes you'd see like four tiny satellite circles so that they looked like those old B movie tropes from the day the Earth stood still, like the old Plan 9 from outer space. It looked like a birth UFO with like satellite circles around it being the tripods and the landing gear. We didn't know what they were, but they looked like birthed UFOs. That was the polemic, and to this day, a lot of those can't be explained because sometimes the crop was bent quite high. It's not the sort of thing you could do with boards. And then we started to see like the birth of the pictograms and the actual, the more advanced stuff that we see now. But they started off quite basic. They were like circles with forks and door keys and corridors and bars, picture
Right.
in mind of like the Led Zeppelin cover. Now at that point, the connection between birth flying saucers should really have been blown out the water because no UFO looks like that. Okay, but what had happened was it was so ingrained in the public psyche that these things were connected to UFOs that they then turned into the narrative turned into from birthed UFOs to messages from our galactic space brothers. Now, I contend to this day that those single circles are of a completely different phenomena to what we see post 90 with the pictures.
Really? That's
I
really
think so,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, if you actually look at the original research that was done by Pat Delgado and Colin Andrews and like Busty Taylor, yeah, it does look like it's a different phenomena. But I started to hear about about the human hoaxing element, and I was really annoyed by it because with ufology and with like, you know, Bigfoot, with Loch Ness and with ghosts, you know, the mystery is deep enough without idiots coming in and making it even more complicated with fakery. Okay, so I held the circle makers in the same disdain that probably some of your listeners will hold me, and I don't blame you for that at all. Okay, but
Right, right,
my journey, when I went in and I started to see these pictograms, I'd heard that it was Gaia or nature spirits or military testing, UFOs, everything that you hear as well. And as I said, I had no time for these hoaxes. The analogy I always use is that it's the magician with the ball under the cup. Okay, there's three cups. You don't need another idiot to come and add another 10. It's deep enough as it is. But then I started to hear, and also we had a site called the Crop Circle Connector. So that would tell you new formations that were made and where they were. And I used to do day trips from London to go down to Wiltshire and plot to see all of them in a couple of days. Now, if there were 10 and two were known to be man-made, you just wouldn't even bother, Matt. You just say, "Oh, it's man-made. It's a hoax. I don't care." You know, you just wouldn't go.
right.
And then I started to sort of hear sort of musings from normally second or third hand reports from crop circle makers that were having very strange events happen to them in the fields. Now they were seeing UAPs, but I don't want to put too much emphasis on that because in this area where we live, you see that stuff anyway. Okay. We think that the UAPs are what used to be referred to as nature spirits and sprites and will-o'-the-wisps. I don't think that there's anything that connects crop circles to UAPs. I think that they're here anyway. And
Okay,
if you speak to the locals here, they will tell you that they've been seeing this stuff for generations, regardless of crop circles
right.
and regardless of the military bases that have been planted here ever since. So I was hearing about UAPs, but I was also hearing, and this is what interested me most of all, because I'm a big fan of Jacques Vallée. It was talking about dream-driven events, and there was a lot of synchronicity. There was a lot of synchronicity involved, where there'd be like correlating events which would lead a team to make a circle in a particular point that wasn't relevant to them at the time, but it turns out there was great significance afterwards. And that's where I became interested because these people, they were quite humble, and they were, when I finally got to meet them, they were sort of almost apologetic about what they did, and they said, "We're not looking to pull the wool over people's eyes. We feel compelled to do this, and
Wow.
the fact that we're doing it on ancient sites,
Hmm.
it's almost like they were rebooting the work of their forebears that had planted the stone circles. They were doing it in crop, like sort of temporary, transitory temples that would then be reaped within a few weeks. But
Interesting.
they were very respectful about what they were doing, and they were quite humble about what they were doing. And they were saying, "Yeah, we can understand that people hate us, but there is." We just feel that we're compelled to do it, and we don't necessarily know why, and they just wondered if there wasn't some kind of engineering involved. There's a lot of situations where a crop circle team would go to make a circle, and and the self same circle that they were going to make is already in the field. And what I don't know is whether there is some sort of species field or telepathy or collective unconsciousness between the circle makers themselves, or if there's something else at play that we don't fully understand.
Huh. That's very interesting. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, a lot of people say that, it's aliens and they've seen ships fly over and then, the fields just go, basically into the crop field, into the crop circles. Or I've heard stories of flashes.
Yeah, but this is the thing though. So certainly when it comes to the orbs creating the crop circles, there is one particular video called the Oliver's Castle video, which is supposedly footage of crop circles, of a crop circle being formed by orbs. Now that crop circle was definitely there, okay, but there is contention about that video. It's not. A lot of people, a lot of even serious researchers that are complete on the UFOs ET side, a lot of those are even saying that there's serious questions, okay. But as regards flashes of light and we are seeing that stuff in the fields, okay. And when people have paranormal, or they have when visitors have unusual experiences in the fields with the crop circles, that the tendency is to say, well, that can't be man-made because something very strange and special happened, okay. But what we're contending is saying, well, there's something within the creation process, whether we're conscious of it or not, okay, which still makes that circle kind of special. And unfortunately, because there are so many bad crop circles out there, the analogy that I have to sort of use to you is it's like being in a rock and roll band. If you're in a rock and roll band, you can rehearse in Auntie's basement, okay? It's like the Bill and Ted band. You know, you can be absolutely awful and only choose to go out live and play your first gig outside of the basement when you're ready. Crop circle teams don't get that privilege. So that they're rehearsing from day one, okay,
Right.
making bad crop circles because they're just starting out. And unfortunately, that's lumped in the same. Well, that's obviously all of the human-made ones. They're all rubbish, okay. But those same teams will be the same teams that the believers are like deifying in 2 years' time when they've got really good, and then they're saying that's the real thing. So unfortunately, people are putting too much emphasis on bad crop circles when a lot of the time that's either a new team starting out or it is people messing about, and we've got no time for people messing about. That's part of the phenomenon that I'm really sort of, got strong
Right.
opinions about. It should be, you should be doing it for the right reasons, and
Right.
it's spiritual land, okay. So we do have a sort of reverence to what we're doing, and we're not looking to pull the wool over our people's eyes. There's just this compulsion, like Roy Neary with the Devil's Tower models. You know, a lot of people do it, and they don't necessarily know why they're doing it. Now, if you want to believe that, that some are made by ET or other sources, then I've got no problem with you believing that, because I don't want to burst your bubble. It took me 40 years research to get to where I am. But
Right.
if you want to believe that there's a section of crop circles that can't be explained, then fine. But what I'm saying is, don't throw the baby out the bathwater. There's still something really strange happening with the ones that are made by people, if that makes sense.
Right. So they've done a lot of testing on the crops, the corn, the wheat, and stuff like that have been actually mashed down. There's been a lot of paranormal investigators who go out and they find radiation, radioactive material out there, and then also they find like landing spots where they find actually what looks like burned triangles or diamonds in the in the fields themselves. And then
When
also
you
they've
say
taken some of the corn
what do you
back.
mean what do you mean about, I don't understand what you mean about the burnt. I'm fine with the first bit, but I don't understand what you mean about the burnt triangles. I've not heard that before. What's that?
Like if somebody had landed and put its landing pad down, a craft. Let's just say it's a craft, and it put its landing pad down. It burnt wherever the landing gear had landed. Right? If it's sometimes they're in the form of a triangle, sometimes they're square, sometimes they're a diamond shape. They found that there's radioactive material. It's the corn or the wheat has become radioactive in that area.
Yeah, but
Um,
are
Also,
you yeah, are you not confusing that with like being a UFO event rather than a crop circle? Because it does sound to me like you're talking about a scorched event from what looks like
well, that
a
too,
landed.
but also it's very rare. But they have found places where they think UFOs have actually landed in a few of the crop circles. And then they've also taken readings on the corn and stuff like that. And they're looking at the corn, and these are people that are, agriculturists or whatever have come in. They're top in their field, and the corn is has not been damaged. It's actually now growing, and the wheat has actually just it's like it's been manipulated,
Yeah, okay.
or whatever.
There's two things I'd say to that. The first one is that There was a crop circle went down this year that was really interesting because it was like it was 2 feet because we had this thing called the Cern Abbas, sorry, not the Cern Abbas man. We had this chalk engraving of a man on a hill. It's been there for hundreds of years, and there was a crop circle of 2 feet, as if the man had come down, and then there was like this splash which looked like he'd had a wee. Okay, so it was a joke circle, but at the time it did look good. Now somebody actually did radiation readings on that circle, and you can look at it. It's just come out on video. Now the feet, they recorded no readings whatsoever, but the splash recorded high readings. And that is without doubt a man-made formation because it turned out the people that owned the land,
Hmm.
they owned the brewery that the beer was promoting. You know, they're promoting this beer, and that was the logo. So that is without doubt a crop circle that was made by people. Now
Yeah.
there was also an instance where there was a demonstration done, and somebody with an EMF meter swept the field before the crop circle was made, and it was made in broad daylight. The farmer was paid. It was a commissioned circle, and it was done with a lot of investigators looking on. Now, when the crop circle was finished and it was made right in front of them in broad daylight, the same guy who was, like you said, top of his field then swept the EMF readings outside the circle and then inside the circle that had just been made. And he said outside was flat and inside was the highest readings he'd ever recorded.
Wow.
Okay. So we can't we can't be saying this must be not man-made because this happened. And also you've got to look at the fact that people like Simon Beck are making fantastic work in ice now. Okay, and we've got sand circles here, which are just as complicated, if not more complicated, than the crop circles. Now, it would be argued, well, that's easy because it's done in daylight, but when you are making a crop circle, once your line is down, it then looks darker than the rest of the pattern. And after about 20 minutes, your eyes do become very accustomed to the dark. And also, you've got to remember that the crop circle season is only between kind of like May to September. The artists have got the rest of the year from October to March to actually, plot what they're going to do. And they know the design backwards by the time they get there. So I do understand what your arguments are, but there's still
Well,
something
they're not
weird.
arguments,
Yeah.
it's just questions.
No, no,
Uh,
you're fine. You're fine.
so have you seen the crops where they've actually gone into the fields? And when you smash down the crops, it basically kills the crop, right? It crushes the crop over. Well, they've also found certain circles, maybe not in England, but in the US at least, where the crop is now bent like in an L shape instead of being crushed over, and they're finding
Okay.
that it had been burnt almost. S-
Right. Well, there's two different issues there. Firstly, this is a very important point. A crop circle is a crime scene, not only because we shouldn't do it, but
Right.
because it's like CSI. Okay. So when you go into a crop circle, unless you go in there straight after the crime's committed, what you're doing is you if you get in there 2 days after the crop circle's been made and you think that's fresh in
No.
sort of, yeah, then what's happening is you're treading on the damage that's been done by the 200 people that went in before you. Okay. Now, when it comes to bent not broken, what you've got to understand is when the crop circle was made the previous night, there's moisture there that won't be there the next day. Okay, and so that is going to cause the people that go in the next day, because there's no moisture there, because it's then been sunburnt. Okay, then it will be breaking the crop. But crucially, you're not taking into account phototropism, which is a natural reaction, which means that when a stem is bent over and lodged into the ground, its natural reaction is to then reach towards the sunlight, and that causes the expulsion cavities, which I'm sure you're referring to, where the auxins are released, okay, from the cavity. You speak to any farmer or plant biologist, they will tell you that this is a naturally occurring phenomenon.
Hmm.
But it's something that the ET believers that's kind of latch onto as this must be non-man made.
Well, I've never. I'm on the fence. I don't know what it is. I'm
Yeah.
very curious as to what it could be. I mean, is it people being taken over by spirits? Maybe
No,
they're
I hesitate. always to say that we're channeled, okay, because that implies that we're anointed and special. We're not, okay. But and also when we go into the fields, we're not zombified. There's no amnesia. We know exactly
Yeah.
what we're. Well, there's no amnesia. We know exactly what we're doing. But sometimes you'll come out of a field and go, "Okay, that was weird. Something weird has happened during the creation or before or after the crop circle has been made," because we have a lot of dream driven events, Matt. So we have situations where you dream a certain. I had a situation where I was having an ubi, or I had a recurring dream with an ubi in it. I'd go in a microlight. I was in a microlight craft, and then the microlight craft would disappear, and I'd be swooping over the crop. It was a recurring dream, and I was always in this dream with a school friend that I've had no reason to think of for 40 years. And I had this recurring dream, and it was part of a wheelchair that I didn't recognize. And then one day I took a wrong turn. Now, wrong turn in this subject, it takes on a different significance. Okay, I took supposedly a wrong turn in inverted commas, found myself looking at like this same scenery that had been in my dream. It's exactly the same scenery, and I looked to my right, and the name of the road that I was in was the name of the road that my school friend lived in when I used to go around and play around his house 40 years before. So I thought, this is weird.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then in my dream there was always two crop circles next to each other, and I couldn't decide which one to do. And so I got a team together because there were some people over from Amsterdam and there were some people over from London, and I said to the guys, look, we're going to put one design down from my dream. I don't know which. They're both as easy to do as the next, but we haven't got time to do both. So we got a circle down, and when I went to make the circle, I kind of Luke Skywalkered it. I was really in a quandary about which design to do, so I thought I won't do it until I do the first stomp. Then I know which circle it's going to be. So a couple of feet, and I thought, okay, it will be this. Next day, I get a phone call from my other half. This was in the days before Wi-Fi, so we had to go to an internet cafe to look at the internet. And she said, "Look, you were really busy last night. You got both your circles down." I said, "No, we didn't. We got one down." And she said, "No, your other circle's in the other field." And we looked on the Google. We looked at the overheads on taken by a pilot, and
Right.
you had my field with my circle, and then you had a strip which from the air just looked like this strip, but the strip was actually a massive hill which separated us from seeing the other team and them seeing us. So they were working on the other circle as we were working on our circle, and we didn't know about them and they didn't know about us. And this is where I think, is it a
Wow.
collusion between us, or is it something and that we had another instance where we were going to make swallows, and I was the newbie on the team. I was like the foot soldier. I was like the stormtrooper. I was a new boy. Okay, so
Yeah.
the teacher mentored me all day on what to do because I was the weakest link, so it was as good as me. Okay, so
Hmm.
he said we're going to do swallows. And then we went to make a crop circle that evening, and he sat bolt upright in his car as if he'd had a download, and he said, "We're doing spirals now." And I said, "We can't do spirals. I'm the new boy. I don't know what I'm doing." And anyway, it went really well. And I picked it up. It was a good circle. And then the next day, we went to the internet cafe again because when the circles are reported, you want to see the aerial footage. Okay, so we went to see his crop circle, these spirals, and we looked at it and we went, "This is rubbish. The filters are wrong. That's in green wheat. We worked in golden barley." and
Wow.
then and then we scrolled down, and then we found our actual circle. Somebody else had been out the previous night and put exactly the same design down 10 miles away. And that's where I'm saying to your listeners, what's going on? Is it a collective unconscious thing? Is it like a species field, or is there something else involved?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always heard that ghosts can manipulate our dreams. If you think about it, I always, and this is my analogy, we're basically just energy, right? Our brains like a computer, we consume food to create energy for ourselves to maneuver around and do whatever we do. So I almost wonder if maybe something, maybe goes to the past or are manipulating us or manipulating you guys and communicating with you through dreams and telling you, hey, this is what we want you to put down. Or
Yeah,
even
I've done
further
I've
ancestors or something. I don't know.
yeah, I've done a couple of like Christian podcasts, and they are of the opinion that it's the Nephilim, and we're getting downloads, and it's really quite negative. Okay, but what you've got to look at is this phenomenon has. We've had UAPs, and we've had what you'd now call UFOs existing in this area for hundreds and hundreds of years. And
Right.
if you look at what Jacques Vallée says about cultural tracking, what our ancestors called away with the fairies, we now call abduction by the greys, and we're now calling it, well, the greys are out of fashion now. It's mantids. It just seems to be that the phenomena kind of like evolves based on where we are within our evolution. But I certainly think when it comes to ufology, I don't think that it's ET. I think the ET. I think that's a red herring. I think that this is an ancient phenomenon which masquerades as ET, and it's probably been with us since our inception, and we've just called it different stuff for thousands and thousands of years. That's where I am anyway. That's where a lot
Yeah,
of
I mean, well,
ufologists are
look at the
going.
Nazca
Yeah,
lines and stuff like that.
yeah,
It must have taken them years to make those things. I mean, and
yeah,
make them with such precision. I mean, it's like a crop circle, but it's in the middle of the desert. And they're finding other things just
yeah.
like that. I mean, going back 2,000 years or more.
I,
So,
I think one of the biggest questions that is not asked about the Nazca lines and about Stonehenge and about Avebury and the stuff around here is not how is almost an irrelevance. The question is why, because we've got Silbury Hill here, and that would have taken so long to build that the architects wouldn't have seen it finished because their great great grandchildren were going to finish it. And then you think, why undertake, or the great grandchildren, why would you undertake a project like that unless you got a very 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 good reason to do it? Because you'll never see it completed, and that goes
right,
for Stonehenge and shifting the rocks from where they, because the rocks weren't local; they were from hundreds of miles away.
right.
And it's a question. I certainly think with the crop circles, is this something which we're kind of re we're like what we're doing, are they jump leads, are they basically reinvigorating the energy that's already here that our forebears knew about, but in our technocratic age now we've forgotten about it? Did our forebears know something that was so important that it meant that they had to celebrate it in rock? Okay, and have we somehow got some sort of residual effect of that when we're building these much easier things in crop, comparatively easier things in crop?
Yeah, do you ever get any like messages or anything that like just something that kind of explains why you're doing it to you? I mean, when you're doing the crop circles?
Sometimes I had a really profound experience once, and it wasn't actually while making the crop circle. It was in a crop circle that a friend had made the day before, and it was absolutely incredible, this thing. and and I was in it, and I was by myself because it hadn't been properly reported. But he told me where it was, and I did get what you described there. But it was like this thing where I suddenly had this great knowledge, and I thought, okay, well, I've got this knowledge now. I'll just break that down, and once you do that, it tantalizingly it just goes. Okay, so it's not something conceptual. It's not something verbal. You have this knowledge which isn't verbal, and you think, oh, I get this now. But I wonder if I was actually tapping into like the collective consciousness, from the ancestral point of view. There, you think you've got an answer which you can't articulate, and you think, I'll write that down, and then you realise that it's more of a sense of an answer rather than the actual answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you think these crop circles are like a warning, or if they're just some kind of celebration, or they're just trying to explain something? What do what's your interpretation of
I
what they
think it.
are?
I had a conversation with somebody about this last week because I'm a massive music freak, okay, and the analogy that I'd always use is that magic with the K on the end. Magic is magic. It's a question of how it's used, and that's why Jimmy Page got in so much trouble in the 1970s when he was following the Crowley route. Okay, you've got white magic, you've got black magic. It's a question of the intent. Okay, but it's been argued with a couple of pagans that I've spoken to on their podcast that what we're actually doing is they're actually sigils. Okay. And the fact whether it's man made or not, the power of a sigil in a specific area, which has got Neolithic and ancient, connotations and importance to it, just the act of placing that sigil or that particular pattern in that particular place, and sometimes on that particular date, is something which reinvigorates the land, and it's that's got the power. And when people walk into crop circles and they say, "I feel something," okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a man-made, that it's not man-made. It means that they are actually tapping into whatever the power is that sigil's created.
Right, like the residual energy of the person who did it.
Yeah, but also the residual energy that we've got in the land, which was probably much more powerful when our forebears were building their Neolithic structures.
Yeah. It almost makes me wonder if maybe something like that was already there and over time it eroded or whatever, and you guys are just going back into those, you're being drawn back into those locations to recreate what was already there.
I
You know what I
think
mean?
you are bang on.
Yeah.
I think that's 100% what this is.
Yeah. It's you guys are just, it's almost like you're trying to share a message of something.
But
Yeah.
we don't know what the message is, Matt.
Right. That's the problem. What does it mean?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, our godfather, J.L.N. Hynek, basically said we are not in a position where if we had the UFO problem, I call it a problem. If we had the UFO problem solved today and it was in front of us, we're not advanced enough to understand what the answer is. It's like showing a Tesla to Henry VIII. We are not in the right place within our evolution. And certainly Jacques Vallée is talking from a completely different angle now, where he's talking about what you said before. This thing has a way of actually interplaying with our consciousness so that we think we're seeing certain things, when actually it's got a deep rooted connection right into our hard drive, right into our sort of psyche, so to speak.
Right. That's just super interesting. I've learned a ton from you today. I mean,
Ah,
this is like mind blowing to me. This is
okay.
really cool. So Citizen D, we gotta let you go because we're running out of time. But did you have anything else you wanted to share real quick before we go?
No, all I'd say is that I'm going to say that a lot of your listeners will probably hold me in the same disdain as I held me 20 years ago. But if it's a genuine crop circle made by people, which is done, when I say genuine, it's done with the right intent and it's done with spiritual reverence to the land, you might not want to give such a hard time. You might want to say, well, maybe there is something alongside what we want to see as the ET stuff. And a crap circle is just beginners going out there, okay? But there are experienced teams, and they're experiencing really strange stuff in the process of putting these symbols down on ancient, important, reverential sites. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Almost wonder if they're like ancient burial grounds or something.
There are. There's tumuli and there's ancient burial mounds. They are here. They're all around here.
Hmm.
They are burial. We do have, and we have the Kennet Long Barrow, which is a burial chamber. They are all over this area, and you can see them because they're mounds.
Wow. Well, Citizen X, Citizen D, I'm sorry, I keep calling you the wrong name. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to come over and communicate that with us and teach us about crop circles and clear up a lot of the misconception of what things are and give us your point of view, which has honestly been, just like I said, mind blowing. I've learned a ton from you, and I really
Thank you.
appreciate you originally reaching out to me and telling me, about your story and then coming on and sharing that story with us. So guys,
It's a
just
pleasure.
be open. Again, I always ask everybody just be open and to ideas and stuff like that. So it may not be paranormal like UFOs doing it, but it is kind of still paranormal in nature because some outside force may be teaching them and showing them how to do this and doing it for a reason. And maybe there's a message to us that they're using these people for to try and alert us to something or teach us something or just show us something. So again, if you guys would just please keep an open mind to what he's doing and and stuff like that. I appreciate it. But thank you again, Citizen D. We really appreciate you coming on, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
That's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I can see